button. So, everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
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 Good. All right, I need to warn you in advance, I have a sarcastic sense of humor. That's part of being left-handed, born in Canada and living in the South for so many years. So sometimes if it does, if it's a joke, just pretend it's funny and laugh. That's all I want to say. But anyway, Chart Your Course International is basically a talent management company. I think a lot of you are familiar with us and get my Navigator newsletter, but we deal from the whole gamut of creating a great place to work, and it begins by hiring the right people and making sure they communicate as effectively as possible. Henry Ford and I sort of share the same or used to share the same philosophy when we talk about talent management. And his quote is, "All I want is a good pair of hands. Unfortunately, I must take them with a person attached." And what we talk about is in the old days, is many times employers used to think, well, all I want from you is your hands, your back, or your muscles, and leave your brain at the door. Just do your job. Well, we all are in the talent management business. All of you on the call today are consultants or trainers or executive coaches, and we understand that sometimes behaviors or our personality can get in the way of us accomplishing the job. Communication is the number one issue, and we all communicate differently. And by understanding those different communication styles, then we're going to become much more effective in our jobs, much more valuable to our clients. Now, just a quick little story is I grew up, when I graduated from college, I had two goals in my life. I wanted to be an Army officer and a management consultant, and I've been very fortunate to be able to do both. And the way I was in my 20s as a young lieutenant, I used to think if your management style was not like my management style, you were defective. Because I'm what you call a basic high D, task-oriented driver type of person. Now I've matured and gotten grayer in my old age, and have adapted a lot more. But that's the way I used to think. If they weren't like a high D, something was wrong with them, and how dumb that was in my thinking. So I am going to hopefully broaden your expansions. I know all of you bring, must be 60, 70, 80 years of experience on the call today, and I want you to feel free to if there are questions. I want to make this as flexible and adaptable as possible, but with this many people on a call, I want to make sure I cover as much information as possible. Now, let me cover some of the things you should have gotten in your box of materials. I know we had someone sign up late Friday, and you probably haven't gotten your materials, but this is what you're going to get. In your box, you got a hardbound manual, which is most of the information that we'll be talking about is coming from. And, there are specific chapters for each of these three classes I want you to read. The most critical chapters are 4, 5, and I would say, 4, 5, and 6 are probably the most important. You got a blue workbook, and this is for two reasons I give it to you. Number one is it's a cheat sheet to help you understand this wheel, which is used in our variety of DISC assessments that you took online. And we'll talk more about that later. And it's also a tool you can sell to your clients, and you can do the basic DISC where you answer the question, scratch it off with a coin, and you just find out if you're a D, I, S, or C. Then you've got a workbook. For those of you who do workshops and seminars on communication or leadership or team building, this is just a tool you can use as an additional add-on if you want to provide that to your attendees or your customers. Now, I did not give you this one, but there is a separate workshop and workshop book for the second assessment that we'll cover in the third class called the Workplace Motivators, which shows how your attitudes, values, and personal interests direct in what goal you're going to. And you've got a CD with additional study materials and information that was not included in your book. You have another little slide card, like a slide ruler, that is sort of another cheat sheet to help you understand the behaviors, characteristics of the 4 behavior styles. Now, if you didn't get any of these, and let me know at the end of the session, and I'll make sure you got what may have been missing. Kathy runs my office. She also runs my life, and she handles all shipping and handling. And she doesn't give me little details to worry about. She handles all the details since I'm a high D and she's a high SC. She also is my partner in marriage and business, so she's the one that has all the details covered. Now, here's a sort of a class overview, and unfortunately I don't have time today to have each of you tell me about your individual goals, but let me just ask you to yell out or not yell out is, how many of you want to do workshops with DISC?
Yeah, I do. I do.
Yes.
Yes.
That sounds like most of you. And let me ask you this, how many of you want to make more money than you're currently making?
I do.
Okay. Well, good. I'm glad to see everybody's normal, because not only do we provide value, but I help people make more money so that they can achieve the goals they have in their life, and do it at the same time of pleasing your customers, so they want to come back to you and not go to some other vendor. And none of us likes to be called a vendor. We have when we're talking about reports and assessments available, it is over 40 varieties of assessments, and we have like 15, 20 varieties of DISC assessments, and then we have several other assessments that can be available to you. I want to do this is have you be careful of background noise. Might be good for me just to mute everybody, then unmute you when there's a good time to speak. So let me go ahead and mute to cut back on the background noise, and then I'll unmute you from time to time so if you have any questions. And if you can't hear me, wave your hand, or I think on this thing over here you can get my attention or something. But hopefully you're still there and you can still hear me. And then validity studies. For all the people who are concerned about validity, all our reports are validated. I think of all the 300 different DISC vendors out there, our assessments are more, I would like to say, more accurate and are valid. And that's the main thing. When your clients talk to, they're going to ask you, well, have these reports, do they meet EEO requirements, and are they valid? Well, you definitely can say yes, and that they meet all the HR requirements as well. All of you hopefully had the opportunity to take your own report. You actually took 2 different reports, a DISC assessment and a workplace motivators report, which is sort of like the yin and the yang, and we'll cover about the workplace motivators on the 3rd class, because it in itself is a powerful report, particularly for you who do work with values and executive coaching and career coaching with people. I can't see how anybody could coach anyone without using this report to really understand what the internal DNA of your clients are. All of you also, when we complete the course, we can provide you access to our assessments through our IDS account, like Susie has, and this is your own account to administer the reports. It's included. There's no extra charge for the account, but obviously if you use any additional assessments, then there's additional charge for those assessments in the future if you choose to do that. Because that's sort of how you can really make money is by providing assessments to different people. Also, in your written attachment that hopefully everybody got, there are 4 videos I wanted you to watch, which I guess provides a better perspective sometimes in understanding the disc wheel and the behavioral graphs. Our class schedule, as you know, I think we have 3 90-minute sessions. And then at the end of the 3rd class, I will send you a fill-in-the-blank examination. This is in order for you to get your certificate of certification from our company. And you have to pass the exam in order to get that certificate. Nobody has failed it as of yet because I don't let anybody fail it. It's designed to be an open book exam. It's designed to reinforce your training and your knowledge simultaneously. Most people will have to have usually a conversation with me as part of that exam in order to make sure you do pass, but you have 30 days to complete that exam from the last class. Now, our course outline, basically this is the agenda. It was on the handout, the attachment that I sent you. Hopefully I sent to everybody and one of the emails and the videos, and there's a link in that piece of paper or that email I sent you that you can click on and watch those videos, which is down here. But if you did not get it or it got lost, let me know and I will re-email it back to you. Now, let me ask you, let me skip over and go to my favorite quote. And I'm going to just unmute you for a second, make sure everybody is still there. Still hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. All right. Everybody's still awake?
Yes.
Yeah, my favorite quote is from Jim Collins in the book From Good to Great. Good to Great. How many have read or heard of that book?
Yeah.
And Jim Collins, and what he says is people are not your most important asset. The right people are. And but he never explains how do you know what the right person looks like. What is the emotional intelligence of the right person? And that's what these assessments do, is help you identify, what makes for an effective behavior in whatever particular situation you're in. And the missing piece when you talk about for selection and for coaching is the assessments. Again, if I knew back in my 20s and 30s what I know today, my life would have been much more simpler, and the people that worked for me would have been probably more effective and happier, because everybody is different. And what the assessment shows is, what's the missing piece that we cannot determine in a job interview, or what we cannot determine when we first meet someone, and that is critical to understand. And like I said, there are hundreds of varieties of assessments out there, everything from Myers-Briggs to DISC to PI to Hartman Value Index. And the key thing is what we want to cover is help you understand the DISC assessment and the workplace motivators. Now, these assessments and in combination of possibly other assessments can help you not only improve teamwork and communication, but also can be used in the right way, and I emphasize the right way, for selection. And there's a chapter in your book, I think chapter 9, which talks about benchmarking the job to understand what are the behaviors that are important for success, and then for placing people in the right positions. And it goes back to the quote, people are not your most important asset. The right people are, and you place them in the right seats, then the organization is going to be heading in the right direction. And it can be used for development and coaching, and for building team effectiveness. How many of you worked for a team and the people just didn't like each other?
Yes, absolutely.
How many people right now are married or have a relationship with the wrong person? Don't answer that question. But but it is, we all have different communication styles, and in relationships it seems like opposites attract. But at work it seems like similarities attract, similar behavioral styles. And then there are assessments that can actually measure how engaged a person is with their job. And what we find is there are certain jobs that have there are certain people who are better suited for certain jobs, and there's an assessment like as I talked about that will show you how engaged they are and how close are they toward burning out or quitting. And so there's all sorts of uses for these assessments, and a lot of you are using them right now. Now, let's talk about the word emotional intelligence. And, that's a real popular word. It's probably been used and abused and misunderstood for many years. But the way I measure emotional intelligence is through 3 different assessments. The first one is behaviors. And it's not personality, but behaviors. And this is the DISC assessment. It shows how a person behaves in a particular situation. And I'll go a little bit more detail about that here shortly. Then the second assessment shows why a person behaves. What do they do? And like I said, why they behave. Have you ever coached someone and they're just not happy in their job, and they're in a job that's just in total misalignment with their natural skills and abilities? Well, that's sort of what the motivation insight shows, that there are 6 motivators that drive people to do certain things in their life. The third report, and we don't really talk about it in this class because it requires a separate certification in itself, is what we call the Personal Talent Skills Indicator, which is based on the Hartman Values Index, who is Dr. Robert Hartman, who's a double PhD, developed this assessment, and it shows what a person's personal skills, their leadership competencies, and there's 32 different competencies that it measures a person and compares them with a mean of 40,000 other people. And so that shows us, will this person behave? Because number one, the first assessment shows you how a person behaves. Are they a D, I, S, or C, or a combination thereof? The second one shows why a person is motivated, or why a person is attracted to certain things, and what are their personal interests. And then the third assessment that combines what I call emotional intelligence is, will they behave? Do they have a strong work ethic or a weak work ethic? And when you know these 3 things about an individual, that will show you, will they perform appropriately in the job? Now, the headlines are full of individuals who have, improperly managed their organization. I have a CEO I'm working with, and I don't do a lot of executive coaching, maybe 2 or 3 people a year, and it's usually the very top people in the organization. And he's been a client of mine for 7 or 8 years, and he's a brilliant guy, a PhD, and he's 100% high C, and he wants to learn how to be more energizing and motivating and a better communicator with people. Well, I could not help him unless I first understand what makes him tick. And I'm and there are some people who are so strong in their behavioral style, and they want to become another way. It's going to require a lot of, well, in his case, I would call therapy, but anyway, a lot of coaching to get them to the point. But if we know that about a person before we place them or hire them or promote them, our life would be much more simpler to determine if this person was capable to fulfill those requirements in the job in the first place. Now, let's move on. And before I do that, anybody have any questions at this point? So the first thing, when we're going to start talking about the first report, the DISC assessment, is we have to realize and recognize that each person is different. As I talked about the president of the company, he is 100% high C. His natural and his adaptive style is 100% C. And if you are in a position that requires some D and some I, it's really difficult for someone like that to make that adaptation, to become that kind of person. So that's part of understanding these assessments. Now, what is DISC? And these are my buddies over at Zappos. You're talking about an energizing, motivating, uplifting place to work. You got to visit Zappos. But what DISC is observable behavior and emotions. It's what you see. It's their tone of voice. It's their body language. I mean, if you could see me right now, even though, and I know you can't, I'm a typical high D. I'm very animated. My hands are waving. That's my high D behavioral style. And each of the four styles has a different way of communicating and may relate to words differently than the four styles. And that is what DISC is. It is how a person behaves, their observable behavior and emotions. So let's look at the first report. And I'm not going to, I did pull up one person's report, but I will not show each other's report unless I have permission first. And I happen to have Karen Carpenter's report open. Karen, are you still on the call? Say that again. You were a little, I couldn't hear you.
I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Now, Karen, would you can feel free to say no, but at some point I may want to show your graph. Would you have a problem with that?
I love attention. Go for it.
I know. That's why I pulled your report up, because I read it. Karen is what we call a high I. And I always love it when I have high eyes on the call. And so that, when we look at the DISC report, many times when you hire someone or interview a person, all you see is the tip of the iceberg. And what the DISC shows, which is how a person behaves, is this part that many times might take you 6 months, 3 months, 9 months to really see about that person. But the DISC report will show you this within a matter of minutes. And the great thing about this report is it's not just something you have a person take and say, gee whiz, isn't that interesting, and stick it in the drawer. It is something the report can be used as a development tool for a coaching plan. And it's designed to be shared with the people that are working or living closely with the person the report was taken on. Does that make sense? Because what happens many times, if you do a workshop and you go in and everybody's just all buzzed up about taking the report, and they're just, I'm telling you, it's like when you have people take these assessments, it's like crack. Everybody's addicted, and they are sharing, hopefully, except for you get a report like my profile, you don't want anybody to see it, but everybody else is excited about the report. And you don't want to come in and do an intervention or do a workshop, and then they forget about it and forget about you 20 days after the workshop's closed. You need to design a development plan where they continuously use that report to improve communication and understanding throughout their organization. Now, let's talk about the 4 behavioral styles. And I have 4 personalities, famous personalities, that I placed on here to help you get an understanding of what the 4 styles are. Who knows what this guy's name is? Simon Cowell, right? From
Right.
what's the name of that program?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes.
American Idol.
You can unmute yourself at this point.
Yes.
Uh,
American Idol.
Thank you. For the reason I can't remember the name of the show. Maybe it's because of him. I suppress his name every time. Now, Simon Cowell is what we call a stereotypical high D. And he's probably like 100%. And I'm exaggerating here because I'm trying to get you to grasp the concept of what each of these four styles represent. High D, their focus is solving problems. And 18% of the population has some high D above the line, above the energy line, and I'll explain what that means. So high Ds is dominance. They like to be in charge. They're more directive in nature. They're, in some cases, depending how high their I is, could be a dictator in some cases. They are not necessarily extroverts. They can be introverts. Now, the high I's like Oprah Winfrey. We were all so sad when she left her show recently. And high I's, they influence people through their friendliness and ability to motivate others. And their strength is their people skills, their relationships. They love to talk. I'm exaggerating here. 100% high I is a person similar to that. And 28% of the population are high I's. I'm jealous of high I's because everybody's is a friend, and they feel so trusting. Karen, is that true about you?
Yes.
Okay. And then we have the S's. S's stands for steadiness. And 40% of the population are high S's. And thank the Lord for S's because they're the ones who stick to the details and get the job done. And S can stand for service to others. It could stand for strength in teamwork. And it's sort of like Mr. Rogers. I mean, he always, you always feel comfortable with Mr. Rogers and how close, the family is and how people are. These are the people who hold the whole thing together. The D's, depending on how I like to make rules and break rules and start new things. The I's build the relationships and make people feel good and are sensitive to people's feelings. And the S's, they have to, they're the ones that tie everything together. And then we have like Mr. Gates, the high C's. The compliance is analytical. Everything they see in life is black or white, right or wrong, proven or unproven, valid or invalid. And, their color is blue. And we'll explain what the colors mean. But their focus and their strength is process and procedures. Now, here's what I want you to do. If you have not written down these 4 P's, I guarantee you will see this many times as we go through this course. And if you memorize anything, memorize these 4 P's. P, the strength for D is solving problems. I's is people. P for steadiness, for high S's is pace, how quickly they do things, or if they're a low S, how slow they are in getting things done. And then for C's is procedures. So those are the P's: problems, people, pace, procedures. And I guarantee you, if you remember these words and which of the 4 styles they go with, you will sail through this course a lot quicker. Now, let's look, if we looked at chapter 4 in the book, and we would see this quote, or these quotations. Again, D for dominance, I, how they influence people, S, their pace or consistency or steadiness in getting the job done, and C, compliance to rules and procedures and constraints. And every one of you has various intensities of all these 4 behavioral styles. Everybody with me so far?
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
I had a client who called me up and they wanted to do 360-degree assessments on 7 different managers. And I just knew from talking to the president of the company, he was a high D. And because, when you are a high D, it's easy for me to identify other high Ds. And sometimes it takes a high D to manage another high D. But he was frustrated, and we were designing this 360-degree assessment because he was frustrated because some of his managers were not responding to his emails and requests quick enough. And usually with a high D, that means like within an hour. And he was getting very frustrated, and I was trying to explain to him with this 360 that there are people who are going to be different in how they respond to other people's requests and demands. Now, and he never understood that before. He thought everybody was supposed to be like him and quickly to respond to every request and every response from every employee. And I said, we can't put that kind of question in 360. It wouldn't be valid because everybody sees things differently. Everybody has a different behavioral style. And there's another way to handle it instead of nailing them as a question in the 360-degree assessment. Let's talk about the emotions of DISC. Anybody want to guess why a D has a red color?
Red for anger?
Very good. Was that Karen?
No, it was Diana.
Oh, Diana. Thank you. Right. High Ds. A high D, that is if you're, pale skin like me, will show anger quickly. And usually high Ds are the ones who have a flash of anger and then they've forgotten about it forever. And they don't even remember reacting to a situation. A low D is totally different. They have a slow to anger. They have a longer fuse to get emotional. And some high Ds can be emotional people. And again, the higher the D, the quicker they respond. Now, Karen, I'm going to just pop up your report, just show one page. If we looked at Karen's D is 63%. And at work, she goes down to 23%. So that is when we say high, usually we mean anything that's high is above the 50% line. And I would consider a high 80% or higher. And again, the higher the D, the more quick or more direct that person is going to be in any particular situation. So let me talk about the eyes. The eyes, much more optimistic and sometimes very enthusiastic people, depending, again, on the intensity of the D score. So high eyes, optimistic. A low I, on the other hand, is totally opposite. And that's a lower the I, the more pessimistic a person will be. On the S's, the green is sort of like, green light means go. High green people are good at relating to team members. And the higher the S, the more non-emotional the person is. The lower the S, the more emotional they're going to be. So if we look at Simon Cowell, do you think he, being a high D, quick to react, do you think Simon Cowell is a low S or a high S, or a low S or high S? Anybody want to take a guess? High S?
Yeah.
Okay. I cannot disagree with that. That appears to be the way he is. Now, when we look at Oprah Winfrey, do you think she is a high D or low D?
High,
Low D.
low.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, low D.
Yeah, obviously high I. Do you think has a high S or low S?
Low S.
Low S.
What makes you think that?
It's very, she's very expressive about her emotions.
Yeah. And then with C's, blue, and the reason we have blue color, now I don't want anybody to get offended because I haven't read all of your reports, so I don't know what you are. A high blue is because, like my CEO PhD colleague, they come across sometimes cold, and they're very difficult to warm up to initially. So sometimes when you see the blue color, that gives you a feeling of blue ice. I don't know if you've ever been to Alaska and visited icebergs, but they have that blue ice in the iceberg. Sometimes when you first meet the person, that's how you feel. And again, the higher the C is someone who will never break the rules. They will get permission before they ever go off course. While the rest of us in the world, including Greg Smith, we rather proceed till we're apprehended. I'd rather break the rules and get forgiveness later. Except, my wife doesn't like that. But low fear, break the rules, versus high fear, get permission. Now, as we go forward, this is where a lot of people start getting confused, because in the second class, I'm going to give you graphs and I'm going to give you descriptors, and you're going to have to tell me different things. And the exam is sort of the same way. But as long as you remember the 4 P's, and let's review. What's the P? What's the focus? The strength of a D is P for what?
Solving problems.
Very good. For I, what's the P?
People.
People.
Very good. S's?
People.
Pace.
Pace. How quick or how slow? And when we start looking at the various descriptors, when I say descriptors, I mean when you look at a graph, and I'm just going to pull up a generic assessment. When we talk about descriptors, these are the descriptors that we're talking about. And so if I give you an exam question and I say this person is inspiring, magnetic, and political, who would she be? High D, I, S, or C?
High I.
Yeah. All you do is look at these descriptors. And I give you a question and say, all right, John is a difficult person to work with. He is pessimistic and moody and very critical of others. Is he high DIS or C or low DIS or C?
Low I.
Low I.
Okay,
Oh.
yeah, you see how easy that is? Now, at some point, if you do as many assessments as I do, you will memorize all these words, because all I ever do now is just look at the graph, and I know exactly the kind of behavior this person has. That will take you time and experience. You will not have that mastered unless you have a photographic memory in 3 classes. So this comes with time, and the goal is, it's an open book process. And when you're debriefing someone with the report, it's okay just to pull this page out separately and stick it next to you when you're coaching the person, so that, makes you a little bit more comfortable. All right, so we talked about the emotions of the DISC assessments. Let me give you a little bit more, a few other characteristics for the various intensities on the 4 behavioral styles. D can also be demanding. I can be inspiring. S, their pace, the higher it is, they appear relaxed. Now, what was the emotion of the high S? It was non-emotional. Do you think a high S person doesn't have emotions? They do, but it's very difficult for you to visualize or see their body language appear to be emotional. So sometimes they appear body language-wise relaxed, but the inside, they could be a raging tornado, and you'll never know until they get so frustrated that they'll come after you with an axe. So, it's my sarcasm. Go ahead. It's a joke. So, you will see questions, and maybe on the exam, says, what's the emotion of the S? And the answer is, they're non-emotional. At least from visualizing them on the outside. C, the higher the C, the more worried they are. I mean, talking about people who are probably most prone to have a heart attack and a ulcer is a high C, because they stress out over things. But again, they're also, like the S, is hard to visualize that. It's all on the internal. While the D's and I's, well, we just spit out and explode and be emotional, and then we're over and done with it. I'm probably the most emotional person in my family, and I'm a high D. So anyway, again, and then you have the characteristics down here. All right, any questions at this point? We have about 40 more minutes to go. Anybody want to have an emotional tirade and ask me a question?
This isn't an emotional tirade, but I'll mention a very quick anecdote, Greg.
Please.
I was once consulting with a company which had a very well-liked high S working there, and I happened to be there on the day when she was showing her low S side, all this stuff that she had bottled up, I guess, and she threw a chair. Is that evidence of a low S or a high S?
It's probably more typical of a low S, and we'll give you other graphs with anecdotes, and I can probably explain graphically what we're talking about. But let's say what we have, what was that movie? I don't know, was it Mimi? It had the little Mimi, Mimi syndrome. A high D, low I, or excuse me, low S can be literally the proverbial bull in the china shop. Let me go to a better graph, and this talks about how a person reacts or responds to certain situations. A high D, someone who's very strong in solving problems, and then a low S are probably more, not the word disorganized, but more spontaneous, and will tend to break rules. And if you add a low C on top of it, then you do have a proverbial bull in the china shop. But again, when we talk about, what was the P that we talk about? S's was what? Pace. The higher the S, the more slower appear. If me being a high D, I used to think someone who had a slow reaction or slow response was just disorganized. But that's totally untrue, because a high S, high C, in their mind, they are so conscientious about getting the job done right and proper and processed and correct and being analytical, that sort of slows down their response. While the high Ds, we just want to do something, and we'll start all these projects and have difficulty finishing them. But these folks over here who are totally S's and C's are polar opposites to the DIs, are more concerned about the quality. So they're thinking, I want to slow down, be careful, be analytical, be accurate, and DIs will interpret them as being slow. Does that make sense? So again, the higher S, the higher C, the more slow and responsive. The lower SC they are, the more reactive they are in certain situations. And we've done studies that the people who are high Ds and low S's are more prone to have traffic accidents because they're not as careful and as cautious as someone who is a high SC. So let's review. 4 P's. What's the P for C's?
Procedures.
Procedures. What is it for the I's?
People.
People.
What is it for the S's?
Pace.
Pace. What is it for the D's?
Problem.
Problems, solving problems. Each one of these 4 people has strengths and limitations. In chapters 4 and 5, and we'll return to that later today or the next class, you'll see pages of information, and it's listed sequentially, beginning with the D's, and it will give you limitations and strengths that each of these behavioral styles bring to the plate. So let's talk about some of these specifics and famous people that go with the high D's. Here's some famous personalities that are stereotypical high Ds, and that's just mean one color above the midline as a D. Donald Trump. Does he act and look like a high D?
Oh, yeah.
What are some of his characteristics? You're fired. And sometimes that's what a high D, low I will be like. Let's talk about Rush Limbaugh, Jesse Ventura, Fidel Castro, Hillary Clinton. Now, when we talk about how in relationships opposites seem to attract, now let me ask you, and I'm not here trying to be political, I'm not here picking sides or anything. Who do you think is who is warmer and more gregarious, Hillary or Bill Clinton?
Bill.
All right. Good. Let's talk about the characteristics of the D's. Focus, problems, and challenges. A D needs to control, direct, challenge, win. What they're motivated by is achieving things. And the important, also when you do workshops, this is a very important aspect of your workshop you need to include, is talking about what motivates the various 4 behavioral styles. Now, I have another good friend of mine who's an attorney, and he gave me permission to use his picture. And he's a prosecuting attorney. And his name's Gary. And Gary and I, we've known each other for 10 years. And you go into his office, on his wall, he has every diploma and certificate, merit badge, Army award he has had since he was a teenager hanging on the wall. And to me, it's sort of comical because it's so stereotypical of a high D. Because what motivates a D and what makes a D motivated is achieving a goal and achieving a level of ego, and I'm not using the word negatively, but egocentricity, that it's about me, that I'm achieving these things. And sometimes a weakness of a D is they'll go so fast that they'll leave everybody else behind them because they're motivated to win, and they're very competitive people. And so, high Ds, don't like reading long, mushy chicken soup for the story, soul stories. They want everything abbreviated to the point. When you walk into a D's office, you don't come in and start chit-chatting about personal stuff. You just get straight to the point, plead your case, and you're either going to be innocent or guilty at the end of that conversation. And so when you manage a D, you got to make sure they stay on task and not start so many programs that they can't finish anything. And when you talk about doing a workshop, one of the things, I'll talk more about it on the third class, is sometimes I will break all 4 behavioral styles and put them in 4 separate corners of the room. And then I give them their disc report, and I pick a group discussion leader, and I have them come up with a list, a consensus, what motivates you as a high D, et cetera, et cetera. And every time a high D's will say, leave us alone, just give us the mission or vision and get the heck out of our way. That's what motivates us. Don't micromanage us. So you see, when you talk about high D's, you see a lot of status symbols because of their egocentricity. And their value they bring to the job, or their job demands, are listed in this slide. If it isn't challenging, if it isn't a big goal, most likely they won't be motivated to achieve it. So, how many of you know high D's?
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Now, anybody have an anecdote or have someone that's a high D that's sort of stereotypical as I described here?
I can think of
Well,
one
Greg,
fellow
I
I
will-
worked with I thought was a high D.
Okay.
And what I remember about him is that when I would come in to meet with him to work on a project that we were jointly trying to accomplish, I would say, "Good morning, Brian. How are you?" And he'd say, "Good. Let's go."
He needs an executive coach. Yeah, you're right. And the problem with a lot of high D, low S's, and I worked with another president of an interior design company, and she was a genius creatively, if that's a proper word. And she was, founded the company. Her husband was the vice president, and she would come to work. She would come in the front door so intense with her that daily to-do list already done in her mind, and she only had 15 employees, and she was sort of the same way. She couldn't even say hello to people. And she would, in order, I try to convince her how important it is to make people feel appreciated. She would send them an email and say, dear Mary, thanks for the good job yesterday. However, you screwed it up in these ways. Da 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 da. Do a better job next time. But she was so intense because of that high D, low I style that, she ended up running off a lot of her good employees because she had a hard time just slowing down. So let's talk about the I's. And we talked about how relationships, people, opposites attract. And one of you said, well, who's warmer, more gregarious, outgoing? Well, obviously it's Bill Clinton. He is a stereotypical high I. And so are these other people listed here. And again, these are sort of exaggerations that, for the actors, what you see when we looked at behavioral styles, you're seeing their character more than, really the inner self of that particular actor. But, we're using this just to help you understand those characteristics of the high I. Friendly, outgoing, and these are some of their characteristics and strengths, as well as some of their limitations. Because you have to understand, everybody has strengths and they have limitations. The goal for some high I's, and I'm not talking about, not everybody's going to be by the book, but their needs is for a high I. Many times they have this definite need to be liked by other people, and that other people's feelings are important to them. I doubt if Colin Powell, not Colin Powell, but Colin, God, why do I keep repressing his name? The guy from American Idol. I doubt if he really worries. Thank you. I doubt if he stays up late at night worrying what other people think about him. But for an I, that could be, in most cases, very important to them. And they have this natural need to trust other people. So one of the limitations when you read in the book, and again, you're going to see an exam question that says, I'm going to give you a graph, and you're going to have to tell me what their strengths and limitations are when you look at that graph, is sometimes a high I loses track of time, that, the people, the relationships, and talking becomes the driving force, and sometimes attention to detail and holding people accountable and disciplining other people is very difficult for a high I. So they have this natural optimism and trust of other people. When we talk about managing change, they're not afraid of change, but sometimes they're going to need a little bit more justification. While the high Ds, they love to create change for everybody else. And so that's why they like it, because they don't even follow their own rules. They're good at resolving conflict. Sometimes a high I may be unaware of whatever the cultural rules might be in an organization. This is an exaggeration, doesn't necessarily is true, but since people and relationships are important, so they may be more concerned about self-improvement. Talking on the phone, long conversations, and if you look at their office, the things hanging on the wall is sometimes it's more team-oriented, family, group activities are more important to them. So those are, again, exaggerations of the high I. Anybody know any high Is that are close to you like that? Nobody wants to admit it. So let's look at the job demands for the high Is. Social interactions, high needs for communication, multitasking, team orientation, freedom from detail and control. We talk about right person, right job. If you hire someone who has a very high I, what job do you think he or she would be good at?
Where they need to create something new.
Mm-hmm.
What about sales?
Sales?
Coaching and training. Coaching and training.
To some degree, I would agree to that. What about a recruiter's job with high communication requirements? Would you put a high I in a cubicle by himself where there's no people contact?
Please don't.
It's about not scratching your eyeballs out. No, they got to have contact. So, and I can't tell you how many people have hired people and then stuck them in some high SC job and then wonder why he or she did not perform fair, and then they fire them. Well, whose fault was it in the first place to put that person in a job like that? So that's important to know. Let's talk about my favorite people, the S's. Steady, stable, amiable. And what do you see that are common characteristics of these three people here as relating to their style? Do you see them as high, D people who want to take charge?
No, they're the nurturers. No.
They're nurturers.
Very calm and soothing.
Mm-hmm. What are the two dominant characteristics between Mother Teresa and Mr. Rogers? What do they have? What's the same with them, with the two of them?
Calmness.
No, they're dead. No, I'm sorry. Bad joke. Anyway, I'm bad. Sorry. But yeah, what you said, the nurturing nature, serving other people's goals, possibly. In some case, Mother Teresa is serving, a higher calling, a spiritual direction. After she died, I read a very interesting report, and we talked about the emotions of the high S's. What was the emotion of the high S? Anybody remember?
They don't have any. Well, not any, but they don't show
Well, they
them.
don't show it to you. Non-emotional. It's internalized emotion. But the interesting thing about Mother Teresa is she was tormented by guilt and lack of, I would say borderline psychiatric issues because, she did not feel worthy, and it just tormented her whole life, and it went into all the letters she wrote to the Pope, and certainly a person like that is emotional, but again, the point is they do not show it unless you really either force their back against the wall or you really know them, very well. So let's talk about some of the characteristics. Let me go back here. Characteristics of the high S's. They have this need to serve others. And when you're putting the other thing, when you do a workshop, we have this little exercise called the building the tallest tower, which sort of it demonstrates to teams how these behaviors interact in either a favorable or dysfunctional way on this particular exercise, building the tallest tower. And again, the S's are sort of the glue that holds everything together. And it takes longer for the S's to make change, prepare for change, and you got to do a yeoman's job to convincing them they do need to change. Now, me as an OD consultant, I go into big companies and we're talking about changing the entire culture. And what I found is that the people I want to make sure are on my side are the S's, because we know they're the ones that are probably looked up to the most by their colleagues. And if we can convince them that change is necessary, it makes the whole transition much more easygoing when we're talking about changing cultures and leadership styles and the like. And family, the other thing about high S's is the family is sacred. They have fewer, I would say, compared to the I's, have fewer friends, but they're much closer to those fewer friends and much closer to the family than, say, the other behavioral styles. And again, 40% of the population is the S's. And their job demands, what gives these people ulcers is people who are changing the rules all the time, or changing way processes need to be performed. They want things in writing. They want, I hired a lady that works for me, Jan. I don't know if you've talked to Jan. There's Jan and Kathy. And Jan is, 100% S. And me being a high D, I just wish everybody could read my mind and I didn't have to write things down for people to figure out, because I change everything all the time and change the dates and classes and stuff on the website, and I just drive everybody crazy sometimes. But with Jan, she's my, office, yin and yang. She's the one that keeps me organized and ensure that I'm, heading in the direction I'm supposed to be heading. But she likes everything written down, and she loves details, and she wants to know all the minute details about everything relating to the business. And sometimes for me as a high D, I just, it's hard for me to sit still and explain it to somebody. But if you have them, if you understand what motivates them and they need for their job, you can't live without them. And let's talk about the C's, because a lot of people feel, since the C is the last of the 4 behavioral styles, we don't give them the credit they deserve. The world would stop if it wasn't for the high C's of the world. And these are some of the more dominant behavioral styles or personalities. Colin Powell, Al Gore, and we know Al Gore was a genius because he invented the internet. Bill Gates, Spock, Diane Sawyer. And the high C's, again, is the problem. Many times the high C's cause themselves a problem because sometimes when they're threatened or a big bossy high D starts barking orders, they tend to back down. And it's important when you're working with groups of people that you listen and give these people the right environment to tell people what they really know, because a lot of them are true geniuses. But many times they feel uncomfortable speaking in public or bringing up important facts that if we did not know, we would, commit, a big mistake. And interesting. Have you ever had a public meeting with, your work team or your client or with your colleagues, and when you ask people, what are your, say you have a meeting sort of like I'm talking to you, and you stop and you ask your team, can I have your comments, or what do you think? Who do you normally hear from in meetings? The D's, I's, S's, or C's?
The D's and I's.
Nice.
Yeah, and we all know they don't know what they're talking about. But it's people like me. My favorite pastime is creating conflict for other people. But many times, because the S's and C's, they don't feel comfortable just blurting out their thoughts, because remember, what are they doing? They want to be accurate, they want to be detailed, and they want to feel safe to bring up their ideas. So what you may have to do is say, hey, well, think about it, and then send me a written notice or an email or something, tell me what you think. And then you may get some input from them that you would not get in a public forum such as a meeting. And I can't, me being a high D, can't tell you how many times I messed up because I did not listen to the S's and C's. Yeah, and that is critical. And many times when you do workshops, you want to make sure that you capitalize on their knowledge and don't make them feel like their input is not valuable. So that's important to keep in the back of your mind. Okay. And these are the job demands for the C. And we need to make sure that we understand what those standards are and they have adequate time to perform their job. And, if anyone's going to resist you when it comes to change, it's going to be the S's and C's. So let me ask you this question. Which style of the 4 we just talked about is the best?
Isn't
None
one.
of them.
All of them.
I heard a lot of noise. I didn't.
I don't think any of them are the best.
They're not? I thought the high D's were the best of the world.
Well, of course you did.
Now, who says I was egocentric? No.
They're all the best and they're all the worst.
Well, I love that answer. I'll put that in my next book. Every time I messed up being a high D, I just tell people I can't help it. It's a genetic flaw. So what I have here is 4 descriptions of one for each of the 4 behavioral styles. I want you to read these descriptions and tell me, who is this person?
Is that an S?
Nope.
And it will be a C.
I think it's a C.
Yeah, it is a C. Now let me give you the giveaways, because I'm doing this because you're going to see some of these common characteristics throughout this course and throughout your life when you're involved with assessments. Is, remember what I said about the C? Sometimes step down when challenged. So they will tend to give in. Now I'm a very fortunate person. I have two daughters who are both happily married to engineers who actually have a good job, and I don't have to support them anymore, so that makes me feel very good. One of my son-in-laws is a software engineer with a major IT company here in the U.S. And last year, my wife and I and he and my daughter, we went to a trip to Ireland. Now, my wife doesn't let me drive because I'll get lost and I'll crash the little car and all those little roads around Ireland, so she drives. So my job was basically to be the financial supporter of this operation. And my son, who's a very high C engineer, his job was to be the navigator. And my daughter, who has a behavioral style similar to mine, we tend to step all over him because we change our minds a lot and say, well, instead of going here today, we want to go there. And he just tended to back down. And I'm trying to tell him, Glenn, you need to step up and just tell these high Ds to shut up. And we'll just follow the plan we had set up, we agreed to. So anyway, the high Cs prefer to listen and analyze. So that's a characteristic of the C. Let's look at the next one.
That's an I.
That's a high I.
That's an I. Yeah.
It's an I.
So what do you see that's the obvious that makes this person an I? What tells you that this is an I?
Maybe make some decisions without gathering all the facts necessary.
Why do you say that? Okay.
Very
What else?
optimistic.
Optimistic?
Very trustworthy.
Trustworthy?
Nice talking to people.
Okay.
All types of people.
God, this class is so much smarter than all my classes. You learn quick. How about this one?
An S.
A what? Pardon?
An S?
An S?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else want to take a guess?
I think it's a C.
I think it's an S.
Okay. Here's
a D.
a D.
Uh-huh.
Well, that's a good guess, but it's incorrect. It is an S.
No, it has the classics of a C.
It
Oh.
it
How come? Because it says right there is a worrier.
well, S's and C, high S's and C's are both worriers. It is probably someone who's a high S with some mid-level C. And here's what we look for. Team player is more of an S than a C. The thorough researcher could be either or an S or C. Premium on friendship, sometimes to a fault, is definitely a high S tendency. Warmly in small groups is an S. Worrier, you could go either way. Family is sacred is definitely the giveaway for the high S. Not to say high C's don't have a family that's sacred. shortcoming, inability to act quickly to change an unexpected turn of events. That could be either S or a C. And so the last one should be easy, right? Who's this?
A D.
D.
Mhm.
D.
That would be a D.
That's the D.
Yeah, that one's easy, right? Well informed on many subjects. Well, that could be true or untrue. It just depends. As Mark Twain said, we're all ignorant, but just on different subjects. So anyway, we're just about out of time and at a good stopping point, and I just want to see if you have any questions. But before I do that, I want to review your homework assignment. You should have watched the first two videos for today's class, and again, if you have not read chapters 1 through 4, you need to read them, and you need to, we're really going to go into chapter 5 on the next class and video 3 and 4. Now, let me just tell you about your hardback, the Universal Language Disc Book. When we look at chapters 4 and 5, you're not going to remember it with one reading. And I still read my book from time to time because you continuously need a refresher. So don't feel bad unless you have, if you have a photographic memory, well, bless your heart, that's great, but most of us don't. It's going to require you to go back and forth from time to time to reread chapters 4 and 5. 4 and 5 are the most critical two chapters in the entire book. So before we say sayonara, does anybody have any questions?
I do. This is Michelle.
Go ahead, Michelle.
So who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Michelle.
So I'm just real quickly, are there any theories that under pressure or high stress that you would flip letters?
Yeah, we're going to cover that on the next class, but the textbook and the research shows, and we're talking about on your graph, and we'll go into that in the next class. For example, this is Karen's, is there are two graphs here. Your natural style, which is the way you are at home, and your adapted style is the way you adapt to the work environment. And this style will, on your natural style, the way you are at home, you can take the report tomorrow and there may be a 10% variation in these graphs, but if you're a core ID, as Karen is, you will be pretty much a core I your entire life, unless there's a significant emotional event in your life. The adapted style, will change depending on the environment, and your environment changes all the time. Someone announces layoffs or we're going to cut back your benefits, this graph will change based on the environmental influences you're experiencing, in your adapted style, in your work environment. So this doesn't change that much. This changes all the time. Other questions?
Yes, I had a question. This is Kima.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, because I have met some C's that did have the fear and not talking up characteristics, things like that. However, the majority of C's that I have come across, they're completely analytical, but to the point where they know that they're right and they're not bendable. So do they have like D characteristics as well, or that would not be a high C? How would you?
No, I think someone who's inflexible
Mm-hmm.
isn't necessarily anybody who has a high or low D.
Okay.
and that's why the second report is very valuable in having, because that shows that possibly this person, and that tendency you described is what we would find in a high theoretical or high traditional motivational style. High theoretical is your typical academic who has so much information they have no common sense but just love to research. A high traditional person has a set of values in their life that are very finite and in some cases unbreakable. So I would so I would have to see that second report on that person to really tell you. But the D doesn't have anything to do with D has a lot to do with stubbornness, but also also a high C can be very stubborn. So yeah, the question is it all depends, or the answer is all depends.
Right. I guess I'm getting confused with the fear factor with the C. Because it would seem as if, and maybe I'm going the wrong direction here, but it would seem as if because they do have all of the facts and they check and recheck and all of this kind of stuff many times.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and with just this I can't speak. With this, if you remember, we had the slide about emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
There, no, you don't need to see Facebook. Wrong one. When we talked about emotional intelligence, pretend you have an onion in your hand, okay?
Okay.
With the DISC assessment, you remove 30% of the layers of that onion. And remember, the DISC assessment is only showing you how this person behaves, the external tone of voice, body language, and how they interrelate to people. That's all the DISC assessment shows you. It's not a clinical assessment. And then when you go to the second assessment, that takes another 60% of the layer of the onion. That shows what motivates this person. Are they driven to be a researcher, an analytical person, or are their values so rigid that they only think, Buddha is the only religious person in the world? I'm just pulling that out of thin air. So, and then the third report, that border, and again, this personal talent skills indicator could, if we included certain information, be a clinical assessment on someone. It takes the person all the way down 90% of information. This report will show if this person really has some significant emotional issues or low self-concept, or they're just lost in the desert because they don't see their life going anywhere. This is the report that would show if this person really has some major issues that affect his or her performance. And so I would, if I was playing psychiatrist, I would do all three reports before I could really tell you if they have a serious problem or they're just stubborn boneheads like me.
No problem.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
This report will also tell you if they carry an M16 in their car. I'm exaggerating. Okay, any other questions? Well, if not, we'll meet up again at Wednesday at 3:30, and I enjoyed it, and hopefully you didn't get tired of listening to me for 90 minutes. So we'll pick up this Wednesday. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks,
You too.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you.
You.